Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Lavelle Neal, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Look, I gotta ask. There's two things on everybody's mind as it relates to the Twins right now. Okay, are they buyers or are they sellers in the next 30 days?
Oh man, if this was a week ago, well, I tell you what, we spoke with Derek Fowler, the team president, on Monday, and he says he's entertaining the thoughts of being a seller. But if you look at the standings, about a week ago, 12 out of the 15 American League teams were within 2.5 points of the wild card. So no one's going to sell under those circumstances, right? It's just then the Twins will continue to lose. I think they woke up this morning 4.5 games back in the last wild card spot. And once you start dropping back 5 or 6 games back on that last wild card spot, as you trade down, it's just going to try to send you to a different direction. So I think the Twins right now are buyers. There was a report last week suggesting that they were in the market for a left-handed hitting outfielder. But if they play like this for 2 more weeks, then I can see them pivoting and going the other way.
Hey, Lavelle, I hate to say this to you, but we're having a little bit of muffling on your mic. Is there can you try to, I don't know, move closer or something with that? Because I love your answer. Oh, it's much better. Yeah.
Okay.
So I know they went in that 6-14 run, right? That vaulted them right to the bottom. Well, maybe not the bottom of the Central, but your take on that was what? They're now moving toward being a seller?
Yeah, I was saying that if they play like this for another 2-3 weeks, I think they'll have to pivot to become sellers before the deadline. Derek Fowler, the Twins president, said on Monday he's not even entertaining ideas of becoming a seller yet. He's looking at ways to improve the club right now. But the way things are going, they're playing the worst baseball of the year. When they get hitting, they're not getting the pitching. When they're getting good pitching, they're not getting enough hitting. And then they're throwing in an occasional mistake. Nothing's working for this team. On Sunday against Milwaukee, they fell behind by 6 runs and came back and made things interesting late, but couldn't get over the hump. Yesterday, they fell behind 5-0, I believe, in the first 3 innings. Chris Paddock figured out something, got put up 2 zeros, and the Twins came back and tied the game heading into the 9th inning. But then Joan Duran, who's an all-star closer, one of the best closers in the game, hits 2 players in the pinky toe with a pitch and loads of bases. They get a sacrifice fly and the Twins lose. It's just going that bad for the Twins right now. So they got to fight through this battle here, because I think they resemble more of the team that won 13 straight earlier this year than the one that is sunk down the American League standings.
Well, let's talk about the negative first. If let's say they continue this, the June swoon, who do you think are most likely to be on the list to be made available to other teams?
Well, I mean, that's going to be a tough one. Byron Buxton's playing the best baseball of his career right now, despite everything that's going on. But teams have watched Buxton break down and land on the injured list over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. So that's going to affect how much they're willing to offer. Although I think Buck making $15 million a year to get the production he's provided is a steal, provided that he's healthy. So that's a tricky one. Carlos Correa would have to waive his no trade clause. He's making $35 million. That's problematic on that end as well. I could see someone like Joan Duran getting a lot of interest. I believe he still has at least a year, if not 2 years, under control left. And he's emerged as one of the game's best closers. I think there would definitely be a trade market for him if they wanted to move him. Some of the other guys, I'm not sure. Matt Wallner's not hitting for power right now. Trevor Larnach isn't either. Maybe they could trade a Harrison Bader, who could be a 4th outfielder or a defensive guy for a contending team. Same thing for Ty France. I don't think that list is very long. Teams will come after their younger starters that they want to hold on to. So I don't think a fire sale would be an option if the Twins decide to become sellers.
What about Chris Paddock? Everyone loves to get starting pitching at the deadline.
Yeah, Chris profiles more as a number 4, number 5 guy. If they need someone to hold down the back end of the rotation, Paddock can do that. There's been times when he's been nails this year, and there's been times where he's struggled. So I think he's a quintessential, back end guy who can, if a Katana wanted him, he's not making that much money. But you're not going to get a lot in return for him. You're probably going to get A ball or double A guy. People seem to think that whenever you decide to become a seller, that you're going to get this windfall of assets in return, and it doesn't work like that. A fifth starter is not going to get you a team top prospect. So every year I have to make sure that my readers have their expectations kind of marginalized a little bit, because everybody thinks they could fleece someone or get like the next best prospect in baseball for a backup player or someone they don't want.
Right. So let's flip the script, right? The Twins are buyers. What do they need the most? What would you like to see them get based on, watching them so far this year? Besides good luck.
2 weeks ago, I advocated in the paper that they should get a hitter. At the time, the pitching staff was one of the better ones, top to bottom in baseball. Not just the rotation, but the bullpen was excelling. And I was like, you can't waste good pitching. When you have a year in which you have a good pitching staff, you've got to make sure your offense is there. They screwed up in 2019 with the bomber squad. They wasted the bomber squad when they should have went out and tried to find a pitcher with all those home runs they were hitting.
Yep.
So I think that I 2 weeks ago I was advocating for them to get a bat, but I don't know right now. They may have to get in that line to see if they can get another arm in here. Pablo Lopez, the staff ace, should be back by late August, September. Zebby Matthews, who's got a shoulder strain, has started the throwing program, so he can be back in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So they'll get a couple guys back that can go in that rotation. But the way things have been going, with Joe Ryan being up and down, with Bailey Ober baffling them being up and down.
Miranda, right?
Yeah. They may want to sniff around and see if there's a starter out there. And I hate saying that, because that list of teams that wants another starting pitcher is a long one. And everybody's going to, except the Los Angeles Dodgers, they just need health. They got 8 starting pitchers. They just need help if there's anything. But yeah, it's going to be tricky trying to find a starter.
So the AL Central, right? The Tigers, I don't know. It looks to me, it takes 2 things to win, right? It takes talent, obviously, which the Tigers have, but it takes incredible luck, be it staying healthy, like you mentioned, or just, players having career years. Do you think the Twins can catch the Tigers?
No, I don't think so. I think at this time of year, the Twins' best bet is to try to get a wild card spot. I think the Tigers are pretty much taking control of the AL Central, and I don't know if anyone's equipped to catch them. And it's been really remarkable. This shows you how good of a manager A.J. Hinch is, and also shows you some of the young talent they have. Tariq Skubal is one of the best pitchers in baseball, left-handed or right-handed. It's fantastic. Casey Mize has stepped up his game on the mound, and Flaherty has been a solid contributor as well, and they've got a good bullpen. I was looking at their I was looking at their lineup the other day, and I don't, Spencer Torkelson, I saw him playing for the Toledo Mudhens last year at this time, and he's found out a way to be a functional guy. I still don't know where Dylan Dingler came from. I don't know. He's come out of the blue to become a guy for them. Moving Javi Baez to center field was a stroke of genius that found him a purpose, and he's taken off because of that.
And he bought into it.
He did. Yeah, and that's an important thing. As we know, someone in Boston didn't necessarily buy into a position change. Cole Keith has been effective, and Zach McKinstry's found a way to contribute. I mean, it's been really interesting to see how so many guys have taken off at the same time for that club. The Royals have been struggling. Cole Reagans is injured. I believe he's still out with an injury.
Yeah, that hurt my fantasy team. So yeah.
Yeah, to me, he's one of those aces in training. I think he's on the ace program when he's going to become one of those elite guys in 2-3 years from now. And Cleveland seems like Cleveland has trouble finding offense, and so they've been struggling a little bit. I don't think they're equipped well. I just think the Tigers are going to walk away with the division, barring a bunch of rash of injuries or something unforeseen.
And one thing, I don't know, I happen to be a Guardians fan, but every time I look at the Tigers, Parker Meadows came up, he carried them for 10 days, and it just seems he cools off, somebody else carries him, and it I don't know, that goes back to my my amateurish statement about luck, but it just seems like they just have the recipe this year. So
I know, and the bullpen's been doing well. This Will Vest guy, has been pitching well out of the pen as well. They've been, and putting together a bullpen this day and age in baseball means you need about one guy that throws 100 and two or three that throw 98. That's to be the going rate now to have a good bullpen.
And they lost Brisky and they lost Foley, and they just seem to have a great farm system to call on. So good for them. I like to see different teams win, even though I'm still going to be pulling for Cleveland in that division. But excuse me. So the other big thing with the Twins right now is the sale.
Mm-hmm.
And the rumors out there that the price is dropping. There's rumors that there's some former players, or at least a former player, who might be part of a new ownership structure. What are you hearing out there?
Yeah, I hear there's at least two interested parties. I think the main person in each one of those parties is from out of town. And I think each one of those groups would add local business owners to that group. I would expect anyone who buys a team that a former player would be a limited partner of some sort, in that organ. That's what I was told at the beginning of this whole process. I wouldn't be surprised if you see someone get involved in that way, shape, or form. I think for the team to be sold, the Twins may have to consider. We think that the family wants $1.7 billion. If they get, I always said, if they got 1.5 offered, they may have to go ahead and take that. And that was before. It looks like the Rays may go for 1.7 billion. The Orioles went last year for 1.7 billion. You think if those teams are worth 1.7, then the Twins should be worth that much as well. It depends on the time and opportunity, because in the Orioles and in the Rays cases, someone bought the team who was in love with baseball and was in love with wanting to own those teams. I think there are people who love baseball in the Twin Cities, but they're not ready to plunk down 1.7 billion, maybe 8 billion, and maybe have some friends come in. But 1.7, I don't see it happening. So, the process has been moving rather slow. But people, both groups have been to town. They've kicked the tires on the stadium. When Justin Ishbia was linked to the Twins, he reached out to people in town. He reached out to other business owners just to learn about the city, the people, the political atmosphere, other business opportunities. So I would imagine these groups, especially if someone's from out of town, they're probably doing the same thing. So those discussions are probably going on as well. So it's going to take a while, unless the Twins finally, decide, well, we're just going to get rid of the team. But I don't see that. I don't see if Major League Baseball will allow them to discount the team too much. It's because the other teams are going for 1.7, and it's another sport. But for some reason, why are NBA franchises skyrocketing in value and not baseball? The Boston Celtics go for 1.6 billion. And the Lakers are going for $10 billion for the former Minneapolis Lakers. That's a credit. That just amazes me, because Jerry Buss bought the Lakers, the LA Kings, and LA Forum from Jack Kent Cooke for $67 million. All right. So that is a $9.3 billion return on that investment. It's just amazing. If those franchises are going up in value, I'd be mildly surprised if they can't find someone to purchase the Twins for 1.5.
Well, what surprises me, is the 1.7 valuation of the Rays, because where are they going to play? That's a big hurdle, as as written in your book, the franchise about the Twins, building a stadium and pulling that coalition together is a job unto itself.
No, you're exactly right. And I pointed out in the book too, Carl Pohlad did not do himself any favors about how he went about asking for a stadium. Initially, making a donation that was actually a loan in which he was going to get paid back for it with interest. That just put himself in a bad light with the public there. In this case, there's probably going to be a new owner of the Rays, so all the bad vibes toward the current owner will be gone. And there is a stadium bill in Florida being kicked around that they could easily revive, especially if the current Rays owner is out of the picture. So it's been a mess down there. I mean, I think they were close to having a deal a couple years ago before the hurricane hit and took the roof off of Tropicana Field. So they had the appropriate money to fix the roof, and so they'll be able to move back into the stadium next year. But I was just reading the other day that the stadium bill is still being kicked around. So it's not a done deal yet in Tampa Bay in terms of finding a home.
So, you look at Target Field, right? I don't know. Maybe you have a little bit of bias, given your long history with the Twins, but it has to be one of the better stadiums out there, right?
I would have it easily in the top 10, maybe top 7. Pittsburgh's my favorite ballpark just because of that view out of the press box of fans walking across the Clemente Bridge, over the river to come watch games. I think that's just awesome. I love Petco Park in San Diego. I love San Francisco's ballpark. I've not been to the new ballpark in Texas or Atlanta yet, but I hear great. I think Comerica Park in Detroit's an underrated park. I think it's pretty solid. Of course, I'm biased because I used to have a cigar lounge in there, but I took it out. I used to sneak over during pregame and get a cigar in before the game would start. But I don't know if that's available anymore. So, yeah, I would have the Twins definitely up in Seattle, Safeco Field, another one of my favorite ballparks. So I think the Twins are safely within the top 10 in terms of stadiums. They've done a great job of mixing the past and the present. The flagpole in right field is from the old Metropolitan Stadium.
Yep.
There's a bar in which half the floor is the floor that the Minneapolis Lakers played on. You got little touches like that. They pay homage to, we have some people have Legion Ball during the summertime. We have town ball leagues, and the town ball champions get their pictures in the bar every year. So it's got a lot of little neat amenities to it, man. It's just a very comfortable, aesthetically pleasing building to be in.
You've risen through the ranks, president of the Baseball Writers Association, the first African American, correct, to hold that position.
That's right. That's right.
Congratulations. So you're a Hall of Fame voter. I have some questions about that. How did it start for you? Why baseball?
God, man. I mean, it's always been my favorite sport. I mean, I pretty much fell in love with it in the early 70s growing up in Chicago. I would watch the Cubs game. I didn't like the fact I thought there were weeds on the wall at Wrigley Field. I thought the Cubs wore strange uniforms. And I switched the channel. There's Dick Allen, hitting 400-foot home runs, and then there was a young Goose Gossage and a young
Bill Melton,
Bucky Dent, George Orta, all those guys. I just kind of fell in love with that team. So I always wanted to cover baseball. I mean, I always wanted to be a baseball guy. I got into journalism. I got into sports writing to become a baseball writer. I didn't do it to become a columnist, although that's what's turned out. That's the path I've ended up going down. But getting up, we have 4 newspapers when I was a kid in Chicago: the Sun-Times, the Daily News, the Chicago Today, and the Sun-Times Today, Daily News,
and the Trib,
the Chicago Defender, and the Tribune. Yeah, Tribune, yes. Yep, and my dad would allow me to get 2. I could pick 2 newspapers a day to get from the corner newsstand, and I'd come back and read. And here I'm a kid reading about Mike Royko, because I kept hearing about how great he was. So I was reading his columns. He was brilliant of taking someone's point and twisting it around on them and making it look like they support the actual opposite of what they were trying to support in the first place. He was just brilliant at that, And so I just thought it'd be cool to be involved in newspapers, and as it turned out, my career went that way. And so I started in Kansas City in June of 1989, and I was there till 97. And the last 3 years, I covered the Kansas City Royals. And then I came to Minnesota in September of 97 to cover the Twins. It was right when Chuck Nalbach was getting traded to the Yankees. That was like my indoctrination on the beat. So there's been some highs and some lows, some lessons learned, and some growing pains, but somehow I've survived. So I feel fortunate. So it's been great. It's been a heck of a journey.
I will take one exception to something you said. You haven't just survived, you've excelled. Okay. So congratulations, man. You've done a phenomenal job. But from 89 to today, you've you've had to live through a number of changes, both on the field and probably how you do your job, right? So start with on the field. What do you think are some of the major changes in baseball compared to 89 when you started?
You knew pitchers were going at least 7 innings, maybe 8. When I started covering baseball, a horse was still a horse. A fireman was when I started watching the ball. A fireman came in the 7th inning and stayed in and pitched the rest of the game. You had relievers throwing 100 innings a year. It wasn't as specialized as it is today. Especially with analytics and everything, and trying to build the best baseball bat. And not stealing third base. I always wonder if Ricky Henderson played in this day and age, would his manager let him steal third base? Because that's the only reason he became the all-time stolen bases leader. Because he was able to assault third base. Little things like that. Back when I started watching baseball, 25% of the league had African American players, and now it's holding right now between 8 and 10 every year. It's about 8% to 10%. So, heroes. When I was a kid, heroes looked like me, the Dave Winfields, the Dick Allens, the Joe Morgans, and all those guys. Bob Gibson had retired by then, of course, but I remember reading about him as a kid, reading about Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. So I mean, for a young kid, that kind of means a lot. So, yeah, the game has changed so much on the field in the 20-something years I've been covering the game. Before replay. So you had the neighborhood play at second base. If the infielder was just a foot off the bag, and in order for him to not get killed, he could go ahead and get the out call for him. Arguing with umpires has totally toned down. And I used to be part of the game watching Earl Weaver go out and kick dirt on an umpire and scream at it, bloody murder at him. That's totally changed. So it's just one of many, many things that has kind of changed with the times in Major League Baseball.
Well, I'll go back. You mentioned your heroes, and I always wore 39 for the Cobra, Dave Parker, right?
Nice.
And he's in the Hall of Fame now, right? He comes with some baggage. Do you think his admission into the Hall of Fame is going to open the door for the Clemenses, the Palmeiros, the Bonzes? You're obviously an insider to that world, and just curious to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm a member. I've been a member of baseball's Veterans Committee in the past. I was on the committee that voted Fred McGriffin a few years ago, and I was just on the screening committee that put together the ballot for this upcoming election. So I could definitely talk about it. I can't get too specific because I may end up on the committee that deals with Pete Rose, and I think Pete Rose is going to be the case that could be the linchpin for all these other guys to get in, because if they decide to vote Pete in, then that's going to I think people will look at Bonds and Clemens and Sosa and some other people's candidacies differently. It just seems like if you just look at the voting, how the voting has gone through the years with the Veterans Committee, they pretty much make a statement with those votes that you can be famous, you can make a fortune, but if you cross a line between what's cheating and not cheating, then you're not going to get a plaque. I mean, that's what the voting has said to me through the years. So, but it could take a case like Rose's to change all that, and that's going to be a very interesting one. I can't divulge which way I would go, but if Pete somehow gets in through the Veterans Committee, I think that would loosen up everything. Because I've argued before that the Hall of Fame is not an All Saints club. There are people who have come from shady backgrounds, who have done things, broken
Gaylord
laws.
Perry wrote Me and the Spitter. He admitted to breaking the rules on the field, right?
Yeah, it's funny when a pitcher doctors a ball, it's funny, but when a hitter corks a bat, it's the worst thing ever. It's funny we have that kind of attitude toward the game, but yeah, I think a lot of this could change if the Veterans Committee decides that Pete Rose's case is good enough for him to get into the Hall. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I was just curious. I kind of Pete Rose, the player. There there were I don't believe the betting allegations went back to while he was still playing and managing.
Well, if you read the Dow report suggests that, though. If you go back and read the Dow report, he comes up with some evidence that suggests so. Yeah, it depends on how you want to look at that.
Okay. Well, then that defeats that consideration. That came into my mind. So, in the time you're covering, what player maybe, maybe that doesn't stand out in the public as a Kirby Puckett or a Kent Herbeck, who was someone that we should know about and why?
Oh, wow.
That
That's
we
a great
should
question.
remember.
That's a great question. Oh, man. Let's see. I covered the Royals. I covered the Kansas City Royals. My first year on the beat was George Brett's last year on the beat. Well, last year as a player. Let's see. I covered Johnny Damon when he was a rookie. I covered Carlos Beltran when he's come up through the minors league system. Mike Sweeney, one of the nicest guys ever, who was a heck of a hitter. And he's in that group of guys who came up as a catcher. And once you moved him off a catcher, he flourished as an offensive player. Yeah, I mean, can you remember Carlos Delgado was a catcher?
Oh.
That's just remarkable to me. Someone you should know. Torrey Hunter, great human being. Not a Hall of Famer, although he has remained on the ballot through the years. I got to give him credit for that. But high quality person, high quality player, and found a way.
And he's somebody that really responded to, as you note in your book, the way that Tom Kelly handled people and players. Right, Torrey Hunter eventually responded to that, right?
Yes, he did. It took a while, a couple trips back to the minors. There was something called a curveball that he didn't understand existed in baseball. They had to learn about and learn how to hit. But once he did, and he was one of those guys who aged well. He was an athlete, aged well, and he enjoyed a run during his mid to late mid 30s, in which he was a really good offensive player because he realized he learned how to handle pitchers. He understood how pitchers were handling him. And he was still good enough athlete to play a great outfield. So just one of my favorite people ever to cover in the sport. LaTroy Hawkins is up there too. That's another guy who couldn't stick as a starter, struggled some as a reliever / closer, but then somehow ended up pitching for like 18 years with about a dozen different teams,
Yeah.
And those guys live across the street from each other in Texas. Those are two guys that jump out to me. If you want to talk about really good people who played baseball that I've covered, they're up there. Brad Rackey's another one, really solid guy. Could have gone elsewhere and made big money. Decided to stay and stick with the Twins. Ended up being a really effective pitcher. Pitched in the 2006 postseason, knowing that he needed shoulder surgery, and pretty much threw everything he had at the A's in that series and try to prolong the Twins' chances of being in the postseason. Just another high quality person too. The more I think there's a lot of people who are on that list. Joe Nathan, great closer. He had a 7-year run, which his numbers were just as good as Mariano Rivera's, but he was a guy we went to. He was always good about when we needed a kind of a comment about the state of the team or the pulse of the clubhouse. He was always good with those type of comments. So was Michael Kadire, another guy who came up as a shortstop, got moved around the infield, ended up in right field, ended up being a very good right fielder, ended up being a good offensive player, just a solid citizen. I've been fortunate to cover several solid citizens during my time as a beat writer. But you asked me about some of the people you should know more about. There's those guys that are up there. Eddie Guardado's up there too.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to cover some good people.
Awesome. So I'm sorry for kind of a little bit jumping around here, but I want to go back to your experience with the Hall and just get your opinion. So you said Torrey Hunter, right? He's probably in that level just below the Hall of Fame, but I don't know. Let's take Kenny Lofton, right? Awesome player. If the Veterans Committee starts to open up to some of these guys, what do you think the impact's going to be on some of those guys in that next tier? Do you think eventually they'll get in? Is it just put off? Are they going to lose their shot?
I think. Well, I think if it opens up, there'll be the very good guys will have a better chance of getting in. Tori's in that group. It's funny you mentioned Kenny Lofton. I once received a packet. There's a college, maybe Grand Canyon in Arizona, and they have a sports analytics class. And the class, I guess the instructor told the students they went out and tried to find one person to make a case that that person belonged in the Hall of Fame. And this class sent me a packet of information, arguing that Kenny Lofton should be in the Hall of Fame. So I haven't forgotten that. And so that's the type of player that definitely would get. So some more. Joe Nathan could possibly be in that list too. Because my argument is if Billy Wagner's in the Hall of Fame, then Joe Nathan should be looked at differently. Like I said, his 7-year run of dominance was up there with Mariano Rivera's. And he was making $12 million a year as a closer for the Twins. And the Twins try their darndest not to pay anybody $12 million a year today. So that shows you how good they thought he was at the time. So, yeah, and I mean, those cases, there will be a lot of those cases. Chase Elliott's not in the Hall of Fame yet. I'm trying to think of the last ballot and who just missed out. The Lou Whitaker argument would rev his ugly head again. Jimmy Rollins' case would be scrutinized again. The door open to a lot of different cases.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something interesting for people like you and I who appreciate the history of the game to watch carefully. But you're living the dream of a lot of people, right? You're getting paid to go watch an awesome game. So, what's it like to be? When's your day start? What do you do when you get to the stadium?
Yeah, when I was a beat writer, there was nothing like entering a stadium at 2:30 in the afternoon before a 7 o'clock game, because you get there early enough to see who's out working on something, who's taking extra BP, who is coming off the injured list and is trying to run the bases to prove he's healthy, what pitcher is doing work in the bullpen. Why is that shortstop suddenly taking grounders at second at 2:30 in the afternoon? You can see all that stuff happen if you show up at the ballpark early enough. And the other cool thing about that is that you can slowly watch the ballpark come to life, because you have early BP and then you have regular BP, and then there's stretching on the field. And then once BP starts, music starts playing in the stadium. Media's on the field talking to managers. Eventually gates open and the fans come in, and you just watch it go from being nice and quiet. And I would argue that, like, if you go to places like Dodger Stadium, if you go to Wrigley Field or go to Red Sox Fenway Park, and you enter that stadium at 2:30, you can almost hear the ghost having a conversation, of all the great players in their histories, So watching those ballparks come alive just always meant it to me, and they all crescendo with the first pitch of the game.
Were you ever at a point in your career where maybe you wrote something that a player or an executive took exception to? And if you did, walk us through that.
Yeah, that happened a handful of times. It's funny. The funny part, before internet, when I was covering the Royals, I think I wrote something that Kevin Apier didn't like, and I wrote something that the manager didn't like. And see, the funny part is that they'd be on road trips, and they would have like their wives or their girlfriends, whoever, read the stories back to them, would see what was in the newspaper. And so, that's how they would find out. And so then they would come at you about, I got problems with your story. That's not what I said. Or this stat is wrong. I'm not that bad, blah, blah, and you'd have it out. And as long as as long as you're not making fun of a person in the paper or taking shots at them, if you're just using well-reasoned arguments and using stats and fact-based, and then you have an argument. It's like, look, you've been struggling the last 2 weeks. I was just saying, maybe the manager needs to give you a break and have someone else play that day, And I think they eventually will understand. Sometimes they just need an avenue to vent, and you're the person they need to vent at, because things aren't going well for them. But that happens all the way up to, my last year's on the beat when I ripping the organization for not spending more money, or their drafting, or their development, or lack of development of starting pitching. You would always hear blowback. One time I broke a story. I forgot the day that the Twins traded Matt Garza and I can't remember, a couple of other players for Delman Young. It was Matt Garza, Jason Bartlett, and got back Delman Young, and got back Harry. God, what was his name? Brendan Harris, and a reliever. On the Twins had to send another reliever, and my source had one of the relievers wrong. So
Oh no.
the next day I had a Twins official screaming at me, 16% of your story was inaccurate yesterday. And I'm like, really? And what now their argument is that at the time they were trying to get the Rays to take a certain reliever that they wanted to trade. But my report came out, and then the Rays wanted to hurry up and get the deal done, so they held firm. So they say not only did I cost them giving up the player they didn't want to give up. So I that was pretty funny. But the official telling me 17% of my story was wrong because I had one player incorrect in a 6-player deal. It was pretty funny.
Oh man. So, mention you're the first African American to serve as president of the Baseball Writers Association. Earlier, you talked about the drop in participation in the major leagues by African Americans. What's the state of journalism look like in terms of diversity?
It's fine in terms of baseball writing. I'm gonna tell you, man, there was a couple years where I was like the only African American covering a baseball team for a newspaper, but there were 2 or 3 African Americans covering hockey. That's how few us were covering baseball. I was always the exception, man. I took the baseball at a young age, and I didn't let go. I always wanted to cover it. Meanwhile, a lot of my friends in the business covered basketball, covered football, covered colleges. So I remember when the Super Bowl was here in the Twin Cities in 2018. That was the Philly special year when the Eagles won. And so I got invited there's a media party every year, and I went, and I saw about 15 people that I knew that were covering football that I had not seen in like 15 years, just because my path went down baseball, But now there's about 10 or 12 African-American baseball writers now writing for newspapers and websites. So it's been growing, and it's been really neat to see. Because there were years that I was just part of 1 or 2 in all of baseball, which is it's kind of weird. I'm glad that I see more African Americans pursue, because that means that there's someone there who loves baseball that wants to cover it for a living, and that's the key, is that they have an interest in covering baseball and they develop the skills and the writing ability in order to do so. So I look at this period right now very fondly, because it's probably as diverse as it's ever been. And then you want to talk about things that changed in baseball over the years. When I first started covering ball, as long as a player had his underwear on, it was okay to go interview him. They'd have a plate of food from the dining room, eating afterwards, and giving us quotes, chugging a beer. But the proliferation of female sports writers and female baseball writers, players got to cover up now. They eat in the back room. They have a robe on when they come out of the shower. We didn't care if they didn't have any clothes on. Times have changed. The number of media in the clubhouse has tripled since I started in the mid 90s. Just because of internet and online publications. So and plus the in-house productions now that these teams have with their own video people and their own writers for their own student magazines, they're around as well. So it's just a bunch of media people in the clubhouse these days. And because of the presence of women, men have to put clothes on, and that wasn't the case when I first started covering baseball. We didn't care if they came walking out of the shower naked. We just wait for them to get partially cold so we could get some quotes from them. That was back in the day too. If a player got hurt during the game, they let us into the trainer's room while the player is laid on the trainer's room table, whatever body part that's injured, getting wrapped or getting iced down, and he would give us quotes then. Now we can't get close to the trainer's room. So things have changed through the years.
How much has the proliferation of betting affected the journalist job?
Well, more and more, I would say. It's not a daily thing, but our newspapers now, in order to survive, we're advertising. We're trying to find people to advertise, and so we're advertising about casinos and racetracks and betting websites. It doesn't creep into my it didn't creep into my day-to-day writing. I didn't have to write about spreads or money lines or anything like that during my 5 years as a journalist. But I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a thing going forward. The only thing you worry about is the players being targets of people who have lost money because they didn't do something they needed them to do. And Bailey Ober recently mentioned that there's threats against him and his family because the guy didn't win a bet. He had over in a bet and he didn't pitch well. This is not just like a baseball thing. This is a sports thing across the board, especially college sports. There are college coaches who are terrified over the safety of their players because they're worried that someone could get to their players if they're upset about how gambling went before they can protect them. So you see if you go to like Rutgers and go to a college basketball game, there's a bunch of wise guys in the first two rows who all get to have something on the game. So they're watching the spread. The garbage time, they don't want the walk on to hit a layup because it's going to kill the spread. So this is something that sports is going to pay more attention to from a safety standpoint and what's going too far, especially baseball. That's one reason why baseball is going to the automatic strike zone, because they don't want some umpire make a bad call on a pitch that ends up causing a millions and millions and millions of dollar swing in Vegas because someone had a different outcome predicted. So, and as all these sports leagues cozy up to these casinos and these resorts that have gambling in order to get advertising dollars, as long as this continues, its stuff is not going to go away.
And you mentioned hitting players up for a quote, right? Did you have go-to people, that you reached out to? I know you mentioned Joe Nathan was one of those guys who maybe had the pulse of the clubhouse. Who did you rely on? Who did you find most quotable?
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder in today's game because now, if there's a bad loss, no one wants to talk. They all just hang in the back, and the starting pitcher has to go and face the music. Michael Kadire was up there in terms of go-to guys because he was always around. If the team didn't play well, he'd come out and answer questions. If he was in a slump, he'd come out and answer questions. So he wasn't one of those guys that kind of hung back in the players-only lounge when times were tough, because that happens more and more often now. After wins now, sometimes it's hard to get guys out. Well, these clubhouses are so swanky now, and guys are doing so much after games. You got the hot tub, you got the cold tub to help break down your muscles after games. You may have a post-game workout, So it's just because of their daily process that, they don't really come out right away after games anymore. It used to be able to walk into a clubhouse and everybody was there. You just go, eeny, meeny, miny, moe. But as when the team suffers a tough loss, the number of people in the clubhouse usually dwindles. But it was guys like Kadire who would come out and give us something. And we always appreciated that.
Do you think the fact that is it possible that their social marketing, what be it Instagram, Facebook, whatever, is competing and they want to control their narrative? Do you think that enters into it at all?
Possibly. I think that means I think it means more to some players than others. There were a lot of players I covered who had Instagram accounts and were on Twitter/X, but they didn't run them. They didn't provide much content. It was their people, their handlers, and they would post stuff whenever he made a public appearance or donated to charity or was at some special event. That player didn't have a phone in his hand tweeting after games. It was his people. So yeah, and that becomes driving a narrative or shaping your own narrative is a big deal. Some view it as a platform that you must take advantage of. Some people don't view it as a platform that they have to take advantage of, but in order to grow their brand, which also can lead to better commercial opportunities, then yes, you got to try to engage with the millions that are on social media, and which could be a good thing and a bad thing. And yeah, I do think that comes into play sometimes.
Okay, from a manager standpoint or an executive, who was your go-to on those guys?
Well, I was
be it with the Twins or with the opposition.
I had some good people to talk to during my years. When I was really a greenhorn on the Royals beat, I had the end of Hal McRae, all of Bob Boone, and the beginning of Tony Muser. Those guys, I got along with Muser the most. I moved to Minneapolis right after Muser got hired, but I could tell we were going to hit it off pretty good. Coming to Minnesota was awesome. Terry Ryan is he was a general manager and just a fantastic human being, straight shooter. He was available damn near every day. I mean, almost have to get a act of Congress to talk to the general manager, at least once a month during the season. Terry Ryan was in the dining room every day, and he would have daily sessions. Now, part of it was Tom Kelly wasn't the most chatty person when it came to talking about baseball, and he was prone to snap someone's head off if they didn't ask the question the right way or wasn't paying attention to a play on the field. But then Terry Ryan would appear and at least be able to give the company line on what was going on with the team and what they were trying to do. So I always appreciated Terry Ryan making his time available for us. And that was going on up until Target Field opened too. That was talking about 20 years in which Terry Ryan about 18 years that Terry Ryan was willing to engage us. And Bill Smith replaced him for a few years, and he was the same way. So, and I also want to give a tip of the cap to Tom Kelly because, I needed to know why the left-hander wasn't in the lineup that day. And I did need to know why he decided to go with this guy at shortstop instead of third base. He made me dot my I's and cross my T's, and I ended up being a better writer for covering Tom Kelly. I started trying to predict the batting order every day. Okay, here's a lefty. He throws a sinker ball. Okay, Tom Kelly says this guy can't hit a sinker, but this guy can. So I'll put him in the lineup. So I'm trying to think along about what the lineup would be. So Tom Kelly brought that out of me. It helped me overall. So I appreciate that.
All right. So when I'm doing your scouting report, I can say coachable.
Yes, coachable. Yes, I am.
So I want to go back to your book, right? And I study a lot of baseball history and appreciate it. You did a fantastic job for someone who really, isn't, the Twins aren't my favorite team, but I read this book and I loved it. And when I read a book like this, there's always something one fact or something that just hits me. And the chapter on Billy Martin, we forget that Billy Martin's first MLB job was the Twins.
That's right. And I appreciate Triumph Books who published the book. It gave me total leeway what I wanted to write about, and so I knew I was going to write about Tom Kelly. I knew I was going to write about Ron Gardenhire. And I started thinking about Billy Martin. I was like, he was here just a year, and I said, but that was a hell of a year though, because I always heard stories about the year that Billy Martin was managing the Twins, and I happen to know one of his best friends is Howard Wong, who owned a restaurant in Bloomington, and his daughter Donna Wong married a guy who owned a bar in Eagan. It was the first bar I started going to when I moved to Minnesota. So I met her, but she was telling me stories about Billy Martin and Howard Wong drinking at his bar all the time. So I kind of had the background then. So I was able to do some research and talk to a few people. That is the shortest chapter in the book, but I felt he had to be represented just because that was one heck of a year that he was there. And the fact that he went on to become one of the more well-remembered managers of all time, I thought sealed the deal in terms of that decision.
Well, Lavelle, I have to tell you, if you erase the Twins' name, right, and you talk about the fight he got in with Boswell, and you erase his, pick another year and put the players from that year in. In other words, that chapter in that 1 year in Minnesota was a microcosm of what was to follow throughout his whole career.
Yeah, and that fight never got fully reported. I think there's some people that claim that Billy sucker punched a guy, or someone claimed that the other guys held Boswell back while he beat him up. There never was total clarity. I tried to get to the bottom of that one, but wasn't quite. So I had to stick with what newspaper reports had.
Well, you taught me something, so I found that engaging. The whole book was fascinating to learn the backstory to a lot of things, be it the players, the managers, or the trials and tribulations that the Twins and the people of Minneapolis went through to get their stadium done. Oh,
absolutely. I know that I may get fascinated or hooked on some things more than others. Just doing the first chapter on how the Twins came to Minnesota, I was fascinated about all the hoops they had to jump through in order to get the stadium built and to get a team to move there. Um, Even then, that shows you, because when Metropolitan Stadium was built, other teams used that as leverage. You better give me a better lease deal, or I'm gonna go move to Minnesota. I mean, it was started back then. But I always wondered why. I kept always, after I moved here, always wondered why there was such a rivalry between the two, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Well, when I was researching that book, um, I was reading about the 1900 census. Okay, there was a race between Minneapolis and St. Paul to prove they had more people. Okay, so there was a night where St. Louis officers raided a Minneapolis hotel where they found Minneapolis numerators cooking the books to make it look like Minneapolis had more people than St. Paul, put them on the trolley and brought them over to St. Paul for prosecution. That's where this big brother, little brother thing goes all the way back to. So, and they kept going on, with the Minneapolis Millers and the St. Paul Saints and having those minor league battles, and it just continues on and on. So a little stuff like that got me fired up. Spending all the time at the Minnesota Historical Center, which I would recommend, a must visit for anyone. It was just an awesome place to be in. All hours of research, looking that up. Those are the moments where you just lose track of time because you're just kind of devouring everything and trying to figure out how you're going to present this in the book.
Well, if you like stuff like that, I was fortunate. My friend runs the Bentley Library at University of Michigan, and he took me in the back, and it was amazing holding letters that Ty Cobb had written, Charlie Gehringer. I mean, just amazing, some of that stuff. So if you ever make your way up that way, let me know. But
well, you bring that up, another big moment, because when I walked into the Historical Center, I said, give me all you got on Twins history. And so they come out with this cart, and it's got all these binders and binders of information. And it was a personal collection of Wheelock Whitney. And Wheelock Whitney was responsible for the Twins, one of the men responsible for bringing baseball to the Twin Cities. And it was his personal stuff that he donated to the Minnesota Historical Center. So I'm going through this, and I get to this little folder, open it up. There's letters to Wheelock Whitney from Branch Rickey. And I'm going, this letter is like 70-something years old. Oh my God. There's handwritten messages between the two. I was like, this is amazing. And he's like thanking Wheelock for all he's doing and giving them advice on how to keep the momentum going with bringing a baseball team there. And now I'm salivating, like looking at all this. It's unbelievable. This is from Branch Rickey, one of the most famous people in the history of baseball. Are you kidding me? So there were moments like that just made it all worthwhile.
Yeah, and when you get to connect firsthand with something like that through history, it just, kind of brings it alive, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, like I was just saying, I'm holding a letter from Branch Rickey. This is just crazy,
Unbelievable. So Lavelle, where can viewers find you right now?
I still write for the Star Tribune. I cover I'm a columnist now, so I cover everything. In fact, my mission for tonight, I'm covering the NBA draft because the Wolves have the 17th overall pick. So you can find me at startribune.com. You can find me on X at Lavelle Neal. So email is lneal@startribune.com. And I appear twice a week on KFAN, which is a local sports talk show. I'm on Tuesdays with Paul Allen and on Fridays with Dan Barrero. So there's multiple areas where you can access me.
Busy. And I'll recommend to everybody, you want a great read to learn some things you may not know about a team that may or may not be your favorite. Even if it's your favorite, you're going to pick up some things that you're going to just go, wow. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere, right, sir?
That's correct. And I even have a box of books in the back of my car. If you ever see me on the street, I could probably sell you a book off the street.
I love it. So one last question before you go. I know you're busy to cover the draft. Thank you for the time you've given us. So what's the prediction for the Twins? Where do they end up?
I predicted 88 wins at the beginning of the year. I don't know if they're going to get there now. Just that they're having so many ups and downs. Royce Lewis has been hurt twice again this year. I think they'll finish over 500, but I think they may fall a little short of getting into the postseason just because The offense has. We're in June now. The offense has not performed up to expectations, and they've got a couple injuries in that pitching staff already that may come back to bite them. So, plus the Tigers are running away with things, and the Central is as tough as it's ever been. They could have 4 teams over 500 again, and that's going to be a battle royale trying to get into the wild card when you have that much competition within your own division.
All right, I lied. One more question. Any rumors around the pick tonight for the Timberwolves?
There's a center from Georgetown. I can't remember his name right now. 6'10" kid from center from Georgetown could be there. I'm going to hold out because the way Tim Connolly, the Wolves GM operates, he likes to make trades, and I wouldn't be surprised if he moves that pick. So I would wait because last year he struck and made a couple trades to get Rob Dillingham, a good point guard prospect, and Terrence Shannon Jr., who's got a lot of ability. So I wouldn't sit there and expect the Wolves to pick at 17. They may be either moving up or moving down tonight.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, sir, for joining us. Appreciate you. And I'd like to say go Twins, but I can't. My heart's in Cleveland, man.
That's right. You don't have to, man. Go Guardians. Go ahead and say it. It's all right. Love the time here. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right.